Good, happy Sunday afternoon, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to this edition of Politics with Riley King. Let's begin. Nearly 50,000 people registered to vote in New Hampshire on Election Day. Nearly 50,000 people registered to vote in New Hampshire on Election Day, November 6th, far more than the number of same-day registrants in previous midterm elections. The latest registration numbers released by the Secretary of State's office on Wednesday, first reported by New Hampshire primary source on Twitter, also showed that despite big Democratic victory in congressional and state legislative and executive council races, the growth in Democrat registrants between the September primary election and the general election was smaller than the number of undeclared and Republican registrants. A total of 48,231 people registered to vote on November 6, about 15,000 more than the 33,479 people who were same-day registrants on Election Day in 2014. Turnouts during the presidential years are higher than during midterm elections, but just for perspective, there were 83,142 registrants on Election Day in 2016. In 2018, the number of undeclared registrants increased from 386,390 people after the September 11 primary to 414,798 after the general election. Republican registrants increased from 296,553 on September 11 to 306,600 on November 6. And Democrat registrants increased from 278,764 on September 11 to 283,729 on November 6. As the results, there are now 1,060,675 registrants voters in the state as compared to 896,829 registrants voters after the 2014 midterm elections. Undeclared or independent voters make up 41.2% of the state's electoral, while Republicans make up 30.4% and Democrats make up 28.2%. Trump backers ready proposal to end New Hampshire GOP leader's primary nationality requirement. Back on December 3rd, that's French presidential Donald Trump supporter Bruce Burton of Windham decided against running for vice chairman of the Republican State Committee because of the party's requirement that offers of the party remain neutral in primaries. State House Committee votes to ban guns from Representatives Hall. Let's take a listen to the video from WMUR News 9.
the State House, a committee says the guns should not be allowed inside Representatives Hall. The Rules Committee voted 6-4 this morning to make that change. The rule has been changed several times in recent years, depending on which party has the majority. Democrats won control of the House in November's election. The proposal will have to go before the full House.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. ACLU files federal lawsuit challenging state criminal defamation law. Let's take a listen to the video from WMUR News 9.
Six months ago, Robert Fries didn't mince words after being placed under arrest by Exeter police.
I'm willing to go to jail if it protects the rights of people. I'm absolutely willing to do it. I mean, I'm in this for the long haul.
At the time, the department charged Fries with a crime for posting comments about an online article on a retiring officer in Exeter.
Which, of course, runs afoul of the First Amendment. That's not how the First Amendment works.
The charges against Fries were dropped, but calling it a time for change, the ACLU filed a federal lawsuit today challenging New Hampshire's criminal defamation law, which makes it a misdemeanor to intentionally and falsely disparage another person.
Mr. Fries is still fearful of law enforcement being able to use this statute to criminally prosecute his speech. This is the second time, in fact, he's been charged with this statute.
The ACLU insists statutes like RSA 64411 need to be struck down.
And that's the problem with these statutes. It allows law enforcement huge discretion to prosecute free speech that the government may not like.
The ACLU says instances like Mr. Fries's are not uncommon. Similar laws remain on the books in 25 states and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Also, we think these statutes are hopelessly overbroad and hopelessly vague, so vague that really individuals aren't going to know what speech is prohibited and what speech is allowed.
Now, WMUR did reach out to Exeter Police for comment. They have not yet responded. Now that the lawsuit has been filed, the state will have 60 days to respond to the ACLU.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. New Hampshire Attorney General's Office reviewing investigating 78 cases of potential voter fraud. Let's take a listen to the video from WMUR News 9.
This week, a grand jury indicted 45-year-old Michael Lewis on a charge he cast a ballot for the 2016 general election in Hooksett, where prosecutors say he didn't meet the domicile requirements.
On the day of voting that we were talking about, my officers were called to the area for a suspicious vehicle on the side of the road.
Hooksett police made contact with Lewis at a polling location.
His story seemed suspicious about why he was in the area. He stated that he was there to vote, but he had a Florida driver's license on him. He told us that he lived at an address in Hooksett, so we went to that address to confirm and found that he did not live there.
Police say Lewis was going in and out of his own car and possibly looking into another vehicle.
At some point, there was a call to us from the polls that he was turned away. We're not sure if he voted or not, and he ran out of the area and was somewhat in the woods, so that all was suspicious to us.
The New Hampshire Attorney General's office says since the November 2016 general election, 4 people have been indicted on criminal charges for wrongful voting. There were 38 complaints. 21 of those have been closed as unfounded. Hooksett police say this case is rare for them.
We haven't been called to before. My officers did a really good job of recognizing that day that it wasn't just a suspicious person.
And the AG's office says they're also investigating 60 potential cases of possible double voting. For more on that, you can go to WMUR.com. In Hooksett, Jessica Moran, WMUR News 9.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Federal review reveals room for improvement in state's EMS system. Let's take a read from this article on the Union Leader. Take a look, everyone. And there you go on that article on the Union Leader. I hope you all enjoyed the article. Mickey Melvini says DHS can't spend money from Mexico for wall. The president's incoming chief of staff said Sunday that any money for the border wall would have to come from the Treasury Department, saying the Department of Homeland Security can't actually spend money from Mexico. And that does it for this edition of Politics with Riley King. I hope you all enjoyed this edition of Politics with Riley King. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, everyone. And I'll see you back here next Sunday for another edition of Politics with Riley King. Goodbye, everyone.